Hello and welcome to our In the 99 Deck Tech series. I'm Reed and today we're going to be looking at Prime Speaker Vannifar. Prime Speaker Vannifar is a 2/4 legendary elf ooze wizard that costs 2, a blue, and a green. Vannifar's ability is tap, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Some notes on Vannifar before we continue. With her ability, you unfortunately cannot go backwards. So if you sack a 3-drop, you must get a 4-drop. You cannot get anything less than a 4-drop. In addition, you can only do it during your main phase, and you can't do it in response to anything. So if your opponent tries to remove your creature, you just gotta let it go. Alright, let's get into it. So first we're going to talk about a few cards that allow us to untap Vannifar to create a pseudo chain of events to happen. Minamo, School at Water's Edge, and Wirewood Lodge are 2 lands that allow us to untap Vannifar to use her ability again. Quirion Ranger, Wirewood Symbiote, Scrib Ranger, Bounding Krasis, Deceiver Exarch, Pestermite, Breaching Hippocamp, and Chakram Retriever allow us to untap Vannifar and our creatures to be sacrificed by her. We also have Mage Right's Stone and 1,000-Year Elixir. Both of these are artifacts that are going to allow us to also untap Vannifar. So the ideal chain that we're looking at here is to be able to sacrifice a creature to go get another creature, to untap Vannifar, to sacrifice it, to repeat the process. Ideally, this would look something like having Dryad Arbor or Lumbering Falls on the battlefield, sacrificing it to Vannifar to go get Quirion Ranger. We bounce a Forest to untap Vannifar. We sack Quirion Ranger to go get Scrib Ranger. We bounce another Forest to untap Vannifar, sacrificing Scrib Ranger to get a card like Bounding Krasis. This, when it enters the battlefield, will untap Vannifar. We sacrifice the Bounding Krasis to go get Breaching Hippocamp. That, when it enters the battlefield, will also untap Vannifar. We sacrifice the Breaching Hippocamp to get Chakram Retriever. This is pretty much the end of our chain, because Chakram Retriever is going to let us cast any of our creature spells to untap Vannifar, to then sacrifice it to go get any other creature with CMC 1 more, turning any of our creatures possibly into a pseudo Scrib Ranger. Now, in order to be in a position where we can just start casting spells for value, we need to get Vannifar out as soon as possible. So we have a couple of ways to ramp us into it. Creatures like Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Boreal Druid, Elvish Mystic, Fin-Horned Elves, Llanowar Elves, Priest of Titania, and Selvala, Heart of the Wilds are creatures that both tap for mana and can be sacrificed by Vannifar to go get other creatures in our toolbox. We're also running Sol Ring and Simic Signet, and a few other ways to just pull lands out of our deck. Coiling Oracle, Sakura Tribe Elder, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, Courser Crufix, Wood Elves, Oracle of Moldiah, and Solemn Simulacrum are going to also allow us to ramp our mana base. Now for the toolbox. There are a few cards that let us draw cards. Elvish Visionary and Soul of the Harvest are going to allow us to draw cards and pot away after we've gotten that enter the battlefield effect. Eternal Witness and Green Warden of Marasa are going to let us get back a few cards out of our graveyard that have been sacrificed by Vannifar or otherwise countered. Reclamation Sage, Manglehorn, and Woodfall Primus should help us control the board state a little bit. We're going to find more card advantage in Beast Whisperer, Vizier of the Menagerie, and Garruk's Horde. And then the one-off toolbox cards that we've put in are Seedborn Muse, so we can untap all of our permanents, Teferi, Mage of Zalafir, to kind of restrict our opponents on being able to cast instants. Time Stream Navigator, as your deck gets thinned out, allows you to take multiple extra turns. Glen Alendra Archmage is a counterspell on a creature. And lastly, we're going to try to win by getting our End Raise Forerunners on the battlefield. This has haste and also buffs any creature that we already have on the battlefield. We have a couple of ways to tutor up cards because just having Vannifar isn't going to quite cut it. Spellseeker allows us to get any of our instants and sorceries that are 2 mana or less. Fierce Empath allows us to pull out any of our big, hard-hitting creatures near the end. Woodland Bellower pulls out a Bounding Krasis with it. Protein Hulk is a creature that allows us to sacrifice it to Vannifar, potentially to get our End Raise Forerunners, and in addition we get any number of creatures creatures whose CMC adds up to 6, allowing us to have a few creatures to pair with that end raise Forerunners. A couple of non-creature tutors that we're running. Green Sun's Zenith, in addition to pulling any creature out of our deck, also gets us our Dryad Arbor. Chord of Calling, Eldritch Evolution, both allow us to tutor creatures. And Birthing Pod is a second triggering of Vannifar's ability in this deck. We are also running a small counter suite to control the board, and we find some instant speed removal in Reality Shift, and the new card, Incubation Incongruity. We're also running Heroic Intervention, Swiftfoot Boots, and Lightning Greaves, so that we can protect our creatures and give Vannifar haste. Now we'd like to take a minute to talk about a few cards that we didn't add into the deck. Since our version of Vannifar is being used as a value toolbox and not to endlessly run out our deck, we excluded a few cards that, while they still synergize well with Vannifar, they don't really fit into our deck build. So the first one is Intruder Alarm. While this does allow you to pull out a complete chain from one CMC to XCMC, and it works really well with Vannifar, it comes into a couple of issues. Since you're still sacrificing the creature to Vannifar, you cannot chain the cards into end raise Forerunners to just win on the spot. This is going to lead into the second card that we didn't add, which is Melira, Sylvok Outcast. This is the cornerstone of a popular modern deck called Melira Pod, where the idea is that you use Melira, Birthing Pod, and a creature with Undying or Persist to retain value and win. Sadly, this is a strategy that commonly wins with colors outside of our wheelhouse of green and blue. While I could see this maybe being a build in a Sultai or Temur deck, it doesn't really fit into just a green-blue deck. Due to the sheer number of hoops that you would have to jump through to set these combos up, our opinion was to use Vannifar more as a toolbox commander instead of just a combo engine. That being to allow our commander to just retrieve anything out of our deck that we need to and value our opponents to death instead of running out some long 5-card infinite combo. If you're interested in seeing this list in future gameplay videos, leave a message in the comments below. You can also show support by joining our Patreon, where you gain access to a lot of cool features, including special content, community news, and our Discord chat, where we talk about what's coming and what's new. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give us a like, tell us why, share, and subscribe.